This is a Gilchrist mandolin. This is not just a Gilchrist. This is one of my favorite mandolins of all time. This is Gerald Jones' Gilchrist, Model 5. We need to get this fixed there. I went to South Plains College last week for Camp Bluegrass, and I taught two workshops on instrument setup for all the instruments. I brought two instruments back with me that were special things. You know, I'm trying not to get too much work here, but this is Gerald's mandolin. It needs a little bit of work, and I brought back a Stelling banjo, a red fox, which needed a couple of frets on it, and the owner lives in Albuquerque, so it was an easy thing to do, you know. And I wanted to check out the Stelling, and probably won't get a video of that one, unfortunately. I thought I was going to, but I may not, because it's still down there at the shop. So anyway, but this is Gerald's mandolin. I've worked on this before. I refretted it many years ago, and it has thin Evo frets on it, which personally I like. But Gerald wants to move to fatter frets, so we're gonna he wants them like an Ellis. Well, unfortunately, there's no more Evo fret wire. And so I contacted Ellis mandolins and to see what they used, and they used an 80 wide. They used a 37 by 80, 37 tall and 80 wide, which I was surprised because I played their mandolins, you know, a fair amount, and I didn't think that was the 80 fret wire because that's guitar wire, you know. And normally I notice that when I'm playing big frets like that. I don't like them on mandolin. I like thin frets, and I mean these are my favorite frets here, but Gerald knows what he wants, and he wants to slide a little bit easier, and so he wants wide frets. So I made a suggestion to him, which he accepted. And I said, look, let's replace 1 through 12 with fat wire, and let's leave these up here alone. And the reason for that is because then when you get up into the higher frets, you got that little bit of extra room in between the frets, and also because the frets are closer together, the narrow wire will look good. So you won't necessarily see this fat fret and then all of a sudden the skinny fret. We're going to use the spacing of the frets as an optical illusion to our advantage. And looking at these, those might be my frets from back when. I know he had some of these replaced by someone else. And I'm not sure what happens. Anyway, I'm not sure if they replaced them all again or what. These look suspiciously like my frets up here. It's funny how you recognize them. So what we're going to do on this mandolin is we're going to replace 1st through 12 with a wider wire, and then we're going to leave 12 and up. So my logic on this was that if you hate the fat frets, then you can go back to the skinny frets, and you'll only have to do 1 through 12 and not the other 15 that go up here. Man, it's a pain in the butt working up here on the upper frets on a mandolin, especially on the little Florida extension right here, which I'm surprised to have frets on it, and we haven't scooped that out. A lot of times what I do on mandolins is I just forget these frets right here and just leave them out because they give you that extra 30 thousandths of an inch of clearance over here. You don't have to scoop that out. That looks really good, but we got frets in there. So that's one thing we're going to do. We're going to replace 1st through 12 with a wider fret wire and leave the other ones up here. And then if he wants to go back to narrow, then it's just 12 frets to go. And if he wants wide on the rest of them, then that can be done later by somebody else. And he thought that 1 through 12 would be perfectly good. So we're going to do that. The other thing that's going on here is the finger rest is really loose, and it's held on by 2 screws up in here, which is common. And I see looking at them that they're loose. And there's also some delamination happening right here. So I'm going to take the finger rest off and take a look at it. And it's held, it's a wood base, and the wood is cracked, which happens. Now, one thing that I've done on these, both of my mandolins are like this, is that if you don't take the finger rest off and on all the time, if you just leave it on there, honestly, man, I just get a little bit of epoxy and put it in there between the finger rest and the fingerboard extension. And you're going to go ahead and just glue it up in there on the extension, and it adds a tremendous amount of support to this. And if you really have to take it off sometime during the future for whatever reason, you can just take a palette knife and scoot it in there, and you can just work your way through there and break the epoxy free, and it's not that big of a deal. And it really adds a lot of support in addition to the screws and getting the wood strong. And instead of wood, I've also used micarta, which I may end up doing on this. So what I'm talking about on the wood part is this. There's a pointer. This piece right up in here. Let me make sure I can see this on the camera. There's a wooden piece right up in here. And the finger rest is attached to that wooden piece. Here's a wooden piece. The finger rest is attached to that wooden piece, and that wooden piece screws to the fingerboard. This is a wooden piece. Well, over time, this thin piece of wood like this will split and crack. And I think that's what's going on there. If you just cut that off and replace it with like a piece of micarta, micarta doesn't have that kind of grain, and it's a lot stronger. And I've also used, water buffalo horn. And one time I had a piece of water buffalo horn, and it's really strong because it's fibrous. And so there's not a single grain line running through it. So I'm going to work on that fingerboard rest, the finger rest. And then the third thing that's going on here, we have a top crack running right up in here. And this is exactly the sort of top crack that I had on my Elkhorn mandolin. I'm not sure it's for the same reasons or not, but I fixed it there. So what happened on the Elkhorn, it had a different style tailpiece. And the style tailpiece that it was using was one that, if it was not adjusted, the height is not correct, and it pulled down like this. So the strings are pulling off of the top of the tailpiece. And if that tailpiece was a little bit too high relative to the bridge, the strings are pulled down. And what that does is put a lot of pressure on here, and it causes the top to implode, basically. You're putting force down like this, or forward force, and it causes the top to split like an orange. Mario Poo pointed that out to me, that that's what was happening to it. So, let me check something. So anyway, the way I solved that was to get rid of that tailpiece, but I noticed that every time I took the strings off the mandolin, that crack would close up completely. And then when you put tension on it, it would open up. And so that's when Mario told me, he said it's imploding because the tailpiece here is moving forward. I don't know if that's the case with this or not, but I'm going to take the strings off and I'm going to see what happens. And if it is the case, then what we need to do is make sure, well, this looks like a good tailpiece. The tailpiece on the mandolin, in my opinion, should go underneath whatever cover there is and pull that cover up to actually counteract that force. So this is a Gilchrist tailpiece. This looks like just a standard Gibson sliding cover. So I don't think the tailpiece is the culprit here, but it still could be causing a slight implosion if that top splits and then becomes weak. So we're going to loosen the strings up, see what happens to it, and then I may end up doing the same thing I did to the Elkhorn, which was to drill a very small hole up underneath the bridge and another one up underneath the tailpiece here. And I used the windlass type things, which are not sitting here on my bridge, or my thing, but I used a windlass sort of thing, and I winched in a very, very thin, super thin spruce shim that runs across this. I did a lot of testing with the shims, and I found out that it could be super thin as long as your grain is running this way. So my shim was so thin that it's held together by sticky paper. And I winched it in up into there, got it into place, and then slid some magnets up into there to clamp it. And it's held for 12 years now. It was a pretty good repair. And then I changed the tailpiece out. And on the Elkhorn, I also ran a piece of carbon fiber rod from above the jack to the neck block. So there's a carbon fiber rod in there that counteracts this tendency for the mandolin to collapse. And Mario Poo suggested that to me too. And I ended up putting a set screw on it so that I could actually adjust the tension of that rod. And he's done that on his mandolins that he's built. He's put a carbon fiber rod in there, and it allows the top to vibrate a lot more freely without being under this compression tension. I'm not going to do that on this one, but I'm going to see what I can do about closing that crack up. So that's the three things I'm going to do in here. The finger rest, frets, and we're going to close that out. So I'm going to take the strings off, and then we'll see what we have, and my GoPro is going to charge in the meantime. All right, got some progress here. I found this on the fingerboard here, and this looks like something I might have done. What it was doing was acting like a spacer right here, like that, to space the finger rest away. Now here's a typical finger rest. It's got two spikes right here, and a lot of times that's all people use. And I wonder if I put this in here last time I saw the mandolin. I'm hoarse though. It looks a little bit like my work because of the way it's added on. And this is ebony, and you can see it's cracked. Got a lot of cracks right here. So I'm probably just going to take this whole thing off of here and replace it with a piece of micarta. And the same thing here. So this was on here like this as a pad. And I think I'll probably just rebuild this whole system and use a piece of micarta, space it out. Instead of having two pieces, I'm going to use one piece, and we're going to take care of this. Finger rest is also coming apart right here. So that needs to be glued, and it's come apart up here, and somebody's glued it kind of sloppy because they left glue in here and they didn't get this squeezed together very well. So we're going to rebuild this finger rest, basically. Now, oh yeah, and the nut's not glued in, so I better get a hold of that before I lose it. And we're missing a screw on that, so we need to take care of that. Fix it. On the top crack up here, I've got the string tension off, and the crack did not close up, so it is an actual true separation. Man, you should see the dirt in here. I vacuum this thing out. This crack is open, and I ran some Goo Gone through it to clean it out a little bit, and also to verify that it was indeed going through. And yeah, that Goo Gone went right through there. So this crack is open. I'm going to try to clean it out a little bit, and then I'm going to investigate how to close this. It may not close. We will see. I'm going to give it some extra humidity, see if it responds to the humidity a little bit. Then we're going to put the cleat in there like I'm talking about. But before I do that, I'm just going to observe it for a little while. And if you push down on the top, like if you put pressure on here, you want to see if it closes up. And I thought it might be. But over here, it's uneven. So I can run my hand across here this way, and I can feel my finger catching on this. So the crack is a little bit uneven over here, which indicates pressure of some sort. Because if the crack is just separated, that'd be one thing. But now one is higher than the other. So there's some sort of pressure going on here. I don't think the tailpiece was hitting it, but it might be. I'm going to double check that to see if the tailpiece was physically pushing down on this at this section here, because you can see a little bit of wear mark right here underneath the tailpiece and a little bit of impression. So I'm going to re-examine the tailpiece, but I'm going to get that fixed up. At the very worst, if I can't get it closed, at the very worst, it's going to get a cleat in there to keep the top from spreading anymore. And it needs to be some strength in there just a little bit. And again, it's a super, super thin cleat. I'm not going to do anything that would hurt the sound of this mandolin. It's a Gilchrist, It's kind of the gold standard for me. Ellis might be nowadays, but the Gilchrist certainly was the first really super good mandolin. And yeah, so we're not going to do anything that would damage the sound of this, and so I got to move carefully on this. I got to think about it. The pickup jack is in the way, so I'm going to have to get the pickup jack out of the way in order for me to winch my cleat in there. But what I would do is drill the hole, very small hole, just enough to get a 013 guitar string in here to pull that cleat in there. And I'll do it right up under here where it's hidden by the tailpiece. And then, of course, when I get done, I'm going to finish it over. And I will do another one right underneath the bridge right here. The bridge does not touch that because the bridge has a little arch right in the middle. So the bridge not going to be putting pressure on that hole, and it'll be hidden underneath there. And again, I will touch it up when I get done, so it's, you know, pretty much mostly invisible. Somebody with a good eye can probably pick it out, but the reasons for why it's there will be clear and obvious, and it's the best solution for getting that cleat in there where you want it, because it's got to get in there exactly where you want it. And it's the only way I figured out to do it on the mandolin. So one way or the other is probably going to get a cleat to strengthen it up, and I will explain the cleat in more detail as I get farther along. This is going to be a long-term video here, so anyway, I got all the parts off. I'm going to work at the tailpiece, and I'm going to work at the frets, and I'm going to let this relax and see if it closes up as the mandolin top relaxes some. I'm not going to be in a rush to humidify it yet. The humidity is good in here. It's 45%. So it's been raining and everything, so the humidity here in the shop is fine. I'm not going to be in a rush to over-humidify it because I don't want to compress the wood cells and make it a permanently smaller piece of wood, like I've talked about before. When you over-humidify things, the wood compresses, and then when the humidity goes down, it shrinks again, and because the cells individually compress, now you have a smaller top than you did before you over-humidified it. I have a whole video on that about learning to read your guitar. So you might go check that out where I talk in extensive detail about that sort of thing. So I want to be careful to not just blatantly over-humidify this. I'm going to leave it at 45% for a little bit with the tension off and see what it does before I do anything. And then as far as the type of glue that I'm going to use here, because there's a crack right here, because there's a gap, hot hide glue is not going to fill that in. I don't really trust fish glue to do it. I might use the technique of using very fine dust and glue and smearing them both in there. But honestly, the glue that I have found that works the best on these kind of things, Titebond 3. Titebond 3 is dark, so it's going to go in, it's going to look good, it's going to look like this seam right here, rather than having a whitey sheen like regular Titebond would do. And it it's flexible. So it'll flex with this top and flex with the seam. And if the seam does flex a little bit, the Titebond 3 will go with it. And it's a very thin kind of watery glue, so it goes really good in the cracks. Takes a long time to dry. So that all those are big advantages of it. We were just trying to hold that crack together there. Hot hide glue is not going to fill the gaps. Hot hide glue has to have perfect wood-to-wood connection, which we do not have here. So I'm not going to use that. Now, one thing I might do with hot hide glue, maybe, but Gilchrist didn't use it to put this top together. So it's going to some other kind of glue here, which I'm trying to clean out as best as I can without making the crack larger. You know, if you stuck a feeler gauge in there and worked it back and forth, you're going to make the crack larger. And I don't want to do that. I just want to clear the dirt out of there. But hot hide glue is not going to glue very good to any other glue that's in there. Fish glue does a pretty good job. I would use fish glue before I used hot hide. But one little trick that I have used in the past on these kind of things is to heat this up, put hot hide glue in there, and size the wood on either side so that there's HHG, hot hide glue, in the wood on either side. And then you humidify it and bring that crack together however you're going to bring the crack together. At this point, you can no longer push glue in there because the crack is tight. But what you do is you take a little bit of hot water and you rub that hot water on there, and it will absorb into the wood. And then you heat it with a hair dryer. And the combination of that, you can even use steam if you're careful and you're confident in your ability to control the steam out of my thing. You can shoot a little steam across there and you get the heat and the moisture at one time, and it reamalgamates the hide glue that is inside the crack already, you see. So you got the glue in here and you got the glue in here. The crack comes together. The glue's dry. You see, it's dry. The pieces come together. And then you re-amalgamate that glue with some heat and some moisture. And boom, and it sticks. So it's stealth glue is what it is. You introduce the glue into the crack before the crack closes. And then you re-amalgamate it with some heat and some moisture, which you can get steam in there. And it will re-amalgamate that glue and stick together. And that's not a bad way to do it. And then you're going to put the cleat in there anyways. The reason you would use hot hide glue is because when it dries, it actually pulls pieces of wood together. That's the way the glue works. That's the molecular pull together. And that's why it's such a good wood when you're doing fresh surfaces, because it'll pull those joints together and actually make them tighter than if you have a smear of tight bond glue in between there. So that's an option, but I don't think it's going to work in this case because this is already spread. But if this closes completely, then I would consider doing that. And I will have to let it dry out again and open the crack up a little bit and get the glue in there. I might be able to get it in. But if you do not have a perfect wood-to-wood connection here, hot hide glue will not work. Titebond 3 will, because Titebond 3 has pretty decent gap filling properties. So that's my strategy. But I'm going to leave this alone. I'm going to work on the frets. I'm going to work on that pick guard, finger rest, and I'm going to do all that stuff first. And so the other thing Gerald wanted to do here is this neck is really, really straight, which is great. But the problem is when the humidity goes up, the neck back bows, and he can't get the back bow out because it's a one-way truss rod. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually make sure it has some relief in it at rest so that the truss rod will work, so that he can dial some relief back into it. And when we say relief, I'm saying really just take the back bow out when the humidity goes up. And that's a unique problem that I rarely run across. Let's see how this truss rod looks right now. It's got a nut on it. Yeah, look at it. Shoot, it's screwed way down there. It's got a lot of threads right there. This truss rod is in there pretty tight. I can't believe it doesn't have relief when you relax it. But in any case, I'm going to make sure that this works. Looks like maybe a 1/4 inch. I can't remember. Yeah, 1/4 inch. And man, these truss rod inches are great for this because they fit in here. And so, gosh, that's loose. Yeah. Wow. I mean, in spite of all that, this truss rod is completely loose. So I see exactly what he's complaining about here. Not complaining, commenting on. Gerald doesn't really complain too much, usually. So this was loose, in spite of all that thread showing. So I'm going to make sure this works. And that sort of thing. Get that nut off of there. Make sure it has a washer in there. I don't think it has a washer in there. So I'm going to make sure it has a little bit of relief in it so that the truss rod will take that relief out so that when the humidity comes up, we can relax the truss rod and it'll bring the back bow down. Gosh, needs a lot of work. Little things, here and there, that you really got to understand how this thing works in order to get the results that you want. It's definitely not a cookie cutter deal. Got to think about this one. So I'm going to go ahead and relax that. Looks good. All right, get to work on this. Whew. I will show you the stages as I get done rather than showing the actual work that's happening. So, see you later. Let's take a quick look at where we're at with the Gilchrist. Get ready to pull frets. I've got the solder iron heating up, and I will show you that process in a minute. Here's a good look at it, which we haven't had a good look. This mandolin has seen some playing time. I don't know how long Gerald's had it. I know, God, let me think, when I played 20 years at least, Here's the crack, and serial number should tell us it might be a 20. It might be, no, it can't be that. Anyway, here's the crack. And it hasn't really done anything yet, but you know, it's not bad. And I bet gluing it and cleaning it is going to make it look a whole lot better. These are the regular mandolin size Evo frets. We're going to be putting some fatter ones in there. Here's the pick guard, the finger rest. I cleaned it all up, cleaned all the glue, made the surfaces fit flush again, and it's getting epoxied up right now. Then when it gets dry, when the epoxy gets dry, then I will clean it up off of here and, you know, scrape it off and stuff. That's where we're at. So let's pull a couple frets so you can see the process, and hopefully I don't catch the celluloid binding on fire, which, man, I am nervous about after doing that D45 1942 authentic. But I've never had any issues before, and I have pulled these frets before. But the binding on this, especially if you look at it very, very closely here, it's actually not even touching, the fret is actually not even touching the binding. The binding is pulled away from the fret just a little bit. So I don't think I'm going to have any issues here. I sure hope I don't have any issues here. Yeah, I was scared. Yeah, that's on. Let's see what we get. So you heat this up because these are probably glued. And I'm not sure exactly what heating does. Otherwise, you would think that heating would make the fret expand and make it tighter. But what it does is loosens the bond. So maybe it makes the wood expand away from it. I really don't know physically what happens. But I know that if you don't heat it good, you're going to chip it pretty bad. So you heat this until it starts smoking, which means that the glue is broken up and all the oils and junk like that that are under the fret are loosening their grip. And then you pull them. I'll show you how to do a couple of them, and then I'm going to move on. And you can see the fretware, and it's funny, he's got most of his fretware on the D string, and I would have thought the A string would be the guy, but soldering iron's not quite hot yet. I'm not sure if these are my frets or if somebody's dressed them. And I'm not sure if back then I used super glue like I did now. This was a long time ago. I'm not sure I refretted this in Evo. I think I used regular nickel silver and thinned it down. Yeah, pretty sure I did that, because that's what I have on my Chris shot. I took guitar wire and I held it on the belt sander and thinned it down so that it's 40 thousandths of an inch tall, but about 50 thousandths of an inch wide, more or less. And I'm pretty sure I told Gerald about that. And so I think that's what we did with nickel silver. So I'm not sure who did these frets. But they're pulling out. Not getting any chipping. I got it started there. I'm going to give it some more heat now that it's definitely clear of the binding now. These frets a lot of times will pull like about halfway, and then you'll feel them sticking, and I don't like to yank them out, so I'm going to heat it some more. I'm not seeing any glue smoking out of here. The reason I use glue, super glue on frets like this, Dave Harvey with Gibson told me that, and he said, you know, they get this large sum of money for a mandolin fret job, and he says anytime they use stainless. Soldering iron is hot. Now we're getting something done here. Let me see if we can make this one steam and boil for you. I can see it. You know, I can see the glue kind of bubbling out of there. They're coming out clean. There's a lot of junk in the slots I'm going to have to clean out, and that's kind of a drag. It's hard to get a saw in there when you have a binding, so I got to clean that out. Doesn't smell like super glue. Super glue within heat like this will smoke, and it has a really irritating, acrid smell to it, which you probably don't want to breathe, you know, but you can smell it. When I smell it, I get out of the way. You can put a little fan on it if you want to. I'm just showing you how long it takes. You know, you can see this in real life. I thought it when I was learning this stuff, I thought it was very valuable to see in real time how long it takes to do something like this. They say heat the frets, you know, so like what, for, you know, a nanosecond, 20 minutes, you know, how long? I think that's about as much as that one's going to loosen. Yeah, there's your fret. Let's see how high these are. They should be, if they're full height, they should be about 35, 37 thousandths of an inch. 30, so they've been dressed at least once. 30 by 53, yeah, so this is the Evo mandolin wire, which I'll have quite a bit of. And it's my favorite wire, but you know, whatever. Okay, so here's the process. I got to take them out to the 12th fret. Then I'll come back and I'll show you how to clean these slots up and that sort of thing. And also to check the radius on the fingerboard so I can get the correct press call to press these down. So see you in a bit. I'm doing frets on this Gilchrist mandolin, and it's been about 3 weeks since I cut the first half of this video. I better get on this here. I had a mountain bike wreck 2 weeks ago. I have a separated shoulder, and if you look, you can probably see it out here. You can see that bump right there. I do not have any fully torn ligaments or anything, but it does hurt, and so this is the first time since I did this 2 weeks ago that I've been able to actually move. So I'm kind of taking it easy on this because this mandolin needs to get done. And I got one guitar over here that really needs to get done. It's in progress. And the point is, I don't know if I'm going to need surgery or not. I'm trying to get these instruments done and gone before I go into surgery, because it could be 6 months. 6 months. 6 months recovery time. Could be. I'm going to find out. I don't think I'm going to need surgery. I had an MRI done on it, and there were no complete tears, just a couple of partial tears here and there. But I have never had a shoulder quite this bad where it's still popping up like this. Now, it will go down if I put it in a sling and that kind of thing. It will go down, but I'm trying to get some work done here. And I'm resting my shoulder on the bench right here to act like a sling as much as I can. Anyway, that's where I've been for the past 2 weeks. Stupid wreck, too. I was going about 5 miles an hour, right around this corner where they had safety rope to lead you around the corner, and my pedal. If you ever ride a mountain bike, especially a downhill mountain bike, the pedals are super aggressive. My pedal caught the safety rope and just stopped me cold and put me over the rope, and I mean, I just slammed my shoulder on the ground. I had absolutely no warning whatsoever. It was just like when Hulk was beating up Thor and picks him up and slams him on the ground. That's what it was like. So don't tell me to slow down, because I was going about as slow as I can possibly go. All right, we're doing Evo frets on here. This is Gerald's mandolin, Gerald Jones. He wants the kind of frets that Ellis uses. So I emailed Ellis and I asked him, what are you using? And he told me, and it's actually guitar wire, which I was surprised at, because when I look at guitar wire on a mandolin, I don't like it because it looks so big. And on Ellis mandolins, I don't get that impression. I look at it and it looks like it's a little bit wider than this skinny mandolin wire but it doesn't look like guitar wire to me. You know, it doesn't look big and fat. So whatever. That's what they told me. So I am using it, and I have enough Evo left that I can do this mandolin and Evo wire. Now, what I suggested to Gerald, he took my suggestion, is let's do the wide, big wire up to maybe the 12th fret. You know, you pick the fret, Gerald. He said the 12th. So we're going to use the wide wire for the majority of the fingerboard, and then we're going to use the skinny wire that's on here, which is also Evo. And this is what I run on my mandolins. I'll get to this in a second. You use the skinny wire on the upper frets right here, which you rarely go into. You know, you do, but not as much. But now you have a little bit more room in between the frets up here with the skinnier wire. And you got wider wire back here on the frets that you mostly use. And so, and now here's the deal, is that if you hate the fat wire, then you can replace this with the skinny wire again, which I have enough of. I have lots of it, actually. So we can replace this with the skinny wire if we want to, or if you really love this fat wire, then we can go ahead and we can do the rest of it with wide wire. But you know, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you could probably leave these off. You know, there's as many frets here as there are here. So I'm doing half the fingerboard with the idea that you could finish it up later, or you could leave it alone, or you could go back to one fret or the other. But why go ahead? Why replace them all and then have the slight danger of saying, man, I hate those fat frets. I wish I had the skinny frets. And then you got to do them all again. And the upper frets on a mandolin are the real pain in the butt to do, especially up in here. You know, you can't hammer. They're a pain. So anyway, I'm doing this, and I just thought I'd show you real quick what the process is like to do Evo frets on a mandolin with a 6-inch radius, which is really now. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and make sure my wire has a little bit extra crank in it here. You want to always start with a nice square fret end. So, like, look at this fret end here. See, it's square, and when you look at the other end, it's got this taper on it right here. That's what normally happens when you cut it. You end up with that. So you got to make sure you cut it this way. You get a nice square end. And then I push that end across there, hold it with my finger, and come up with the clippers. And boom. Now, this ends are both square, but what happened is the end that was behind the cutters is the one that gets the triangle. So before you start, go ahead and cut that off and make it square. Okay, now, I've got a fret that fits here, and I'm going to check the curve on this because this is Evo, and it doesn't, if you don't have a curve that's slightly more than the radius or very close to the radius, it's going to want to pop out on the ends. So if this is a 6-inch radius and your front wire is about a 9-inch radius, let's say, or a 9 or 10, then it's flatter and the ends are going to pop up. So you need to make sure you over radius it just a little bit or exactly the same radius, which it's hard to do exactly the same, you know. I'm going to use a great StuMac tool here that's like one of the most wonderful tools in the world. And what it does is it clips. It hurts to do that. It clips that. So I'm going to clip it here. I'm going to get away from the mandolin when I do this. Make sure these little pieces go off of the bench. And then I'll show you what this looks like. Okay, and then you got the ends. You could take a file and smooth those off, but then these look pretty good. Evo tends to crack when it goes. It doesn't tend to smush and cut like regular nickel silver fret wire. If it was nickel silver and I wanted to smooth it, I'd get a flat file and smooth it a little bit. But this looks really good. So I'm going to double check and make sure that my ends fit well within the fingerboard here. You don't want to go too much, you know, but you got to look for little things like maybe a little bit of glue right here on the very edge of this. Make sure that's out of there. Make sure that fret's going to press down very nicely. This is the critical part to any fret job, is making sure the fretboard is prepped. So you want your slots clean. I can do this motion here, but I can't move. I definitely can't put any pressure on my shoulder here. There we go. You want to make sure those slots are clean. You want to make sure the fingerboard itself is nice and smooth, and everything is good before you go to putting frets in. All right, I'm using gel super glue with this tip on it here, which is super nice for controlling it. And I get down here, put that finger right on the fingerboard here. Let's see if I'm gonna move the camera over, okay? Take a look at it. I'm charging at the same time here, so I had to move that charge off of here. Okay? So I don't know if I'm gonna squeeze glue, but this is what it looks like. Just put a couple drops in there. I'm only doing that because I held the camera trying to balance this. And you don't have to totally fill it, you know, you're just putting some drops in there. Okay, now I gotta get back to work here before this dries, so let's get this camera back down. You just need a little bit of glue, because when you put the fret in there, it's going to swish that glue around anyways. It is very important, I think, to glue Evo and stainless steel. Keep them from popping. I got a little bit of glue here on the edge. I'm going to immediately wipe it up. And because this is glue, super glue, I'm sorry, gel, it wipes up very quickly. I've got a little bit of time. Now I've got this contraption, which actually I should just switch to the other one now. Yeah, I can switch to the other one here in just a second, but I've got to do this because I already have this on here. So, I don't like this clamp as well as I like Jaws, but I was working up over the fingerboard. I was working up here, and I had to use this to get these frets clamped. You don't really have to press them in with this, it's just holding it in. I've got to back off on these screws a little bit, clamp that down, and then put the screws back down on it. You will find that these screws have enough pressure that they will pry that clamp right up off the fingerboard. So that looks good. I'm just looking down there to make sure that looks good. I'm going to use Jaws after this. I like Jaws a whole lot better. This is Jaws. This is Jaws right here, but I only have one 6-inch caul, and it's being used in here. Okay, so that's what happened. And I'm gonna let it sit for a couple minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. Let that glue dry. Oh, golly. I think I've only got one 6-inch. It'd be nice if I had another one. 6 inches is a very, very, very small radius. Oh, I've got another 6. Cool. Cool. So I'll go ahead and rig up Jaws with it while this is drying. You can see I'm holding my arm to my side here to keep it from moving. But I really need to get this done. Alright. Oh yeah. This is the first day I have not worn a sling. It's been 10 days. Today's Friday. I got it injured 2 Sundays ago, so been 11 days, and I've been wearing a sling up until then, but man, I can feel that shoulder popping up. I've got KT tape on right now, and I've got a lot of KT tape on there, the idea being to try to pull that collarbone down. Maybe I'll pop my x-ray up here and you can look at it. And it's not bad, I mean, it's getting a lot better. Shoot, I couldn't do that a couple of days ago. I certainly couldn't do that. So I've been kind of exercising a little bit just to move it like this. Nothing hard, and I'm doing a lot of passive exercise. Again, I haven't been to the doctor yet, so I'm going to get a physical therapist, I'm sure. And but I've been through this with my collarbone, where I have a plate in the collarbone. I've been through it on this shoulder. I separated it, but not as bad. Although I did do the more damage to the back on that one. But But I'm doing passive stuff like this, where I'm not using my muscles and just move back and forth like this. And that's good stuff because I'm not using any kind of muscle to pull that up. And, you know, that's not too bad compared to what it was like last week. You do that, and you do this, and you just move that joint around without using any muscle. I'm using my body to move around. So I'm doing that to keep it from locking up, and while I'm waiting on the glue to dry. So hopefully I get a good report from the doctor, and he's going to tell me surgery isn't going to be necessary. But I guarantee there's going to be a month before this is semi-normal. Gerald's also got that crack in the top right here. This is closing up a little bit, you know, since I've had the mandolin, since the tension has been off the top, which is what I wanted to see. I wanted to see how it would respond with the tension off the top. And, you know, it looks pretty good. I mean, you can tell that it's a crack, but it's not open anymore. So I'm going to use some Type Bond 3 glue and maybe get that little splice. Is it a splint? Splice. Cleat. I'm going to get the cleat in there. And I'll probably just do a separate video on this. I'm going to get this video out because I haven't put one out in a while. So I'm going to visually look at this and make sure it's seating nice and it looks good. So we're going to go on to the next one. I'm going to use Jaws on this one. That's a Jaws too, but this is the real Jaws. And before I start, I'm going to make sure... I'm going to get my clamp on here, make sure where I'm going to be on this. Make sure we're clear in there. You got to watch when you use this tool that you don't hit the heel right here. Because if you hit the heel, you're going to dent it. I've done that when I first started using this tool. And generally, I think I can get here. Yeah, we're clear. We're clear of that hump, but I couldn't use it on the other one. So here we go. This is the first time I'm going to use it. Let's do one more fret using Jaws. And so once again, I'm going to make sure I have a square tip on this, and I do. Pretty square tip. It just gives you more accurate cut when you come up here. Push those pliers right up against the fingerboard, cut. Drop the rest of the wire over there. And this tool, again, clip off a couple. You got to use a little bitty bites or you'll bend the wire. Let's check it. Looks good. I'm going to make sure this is not a little bit of glue right here. A bit of dust maybe. Yeah, that's clear. Gilchrist mandolin. I mean, this is a $25,000 mandolin here. And what's funny is, you know, this is my favorite mandolin. Well, I've been playing Ellis mandolins now. And some of them are pretty good. But for a long time, this was actually my #1 physical edition. This instrument right here, my favorite mandolin. I compared it to my Chris shot. And I'm thinking, you know, my Chris shot's got some game. I still like this mandolin, but I don't lust for it as much now. I'm vaguely thinking about trying to get an Ellis. Just because I have never had a truly top dollar, top shelf mandolin. And they're just so expensive. I mean, that's the thing, is do I really need a $12,000 to $15,000 mandolin? You know? I don't know. Wish I could live with one for about a month. Make up my mind. There's a couple of nice ones for sale too that I could probably get if I sold everything I own. And I just keep thinking, you know, does a deaf guy really need a top dollar mandolin? Or is your Chris shot pretty good? Nice, man. That went really good. I really like the fret just went pop and, you know, went in. And this clamp is just a help keep it in there. Ugh. Come on. Oh, golly, it's fighting me. There. All right, when you use jaws this way, you don't want to put too much pressure on it. You want to just go like that. And I do like that better because, you know, it's such a more positive connection than trying to clamp this. Trying to clamp this, and these screws, like I said, will actually pull this thing up off the board. I have never gotten a really good clamp on this, but it is useful sometimes. It is useful. This is just so much better system. Even if you have to take this off and put the straight block and go into the heel, it's a better system. But I feel pretty good about the way I tapped these in, and then I used that, and they went in pretty good. This board's been refretted before many times, several times, at least 3 times that I know of. And so the slots are pretty wide right now, and I'm not having to hammer anything in. The fret's going in pretty easy, which means that you better use glue. All right, that's it. That's fretting on this mandolin, an example of using the jaws tool and just working my way down, putting these Evo frets on there. Gotta let them dry. Let the glue dry. Don't be in a rush. You know, let that glue dry for a little while. So, all right, I'm gonna stop this. I'm gonna go sit in the chair and rest my elbow, rest my arm. It's definitely getting tired now. So, see you later.